Sweet the whispers in your ear whenever ember wanders near.
I don't know how many of you guys heard about this, but a news story came out about bricks and minifigs. So I don't know how many of you heard, but Bricks and Minifigs has settled with Brian Mansell and his family in regards to the, what was it, $250,000 in missing Lego sets that he had done consignment with Crystal, the original owner of the Bricks and Minifig store where he brought that. So he said, so there's a settlement between Brian Mansell and Bricks and Minifigs. Both Legal Mindset and Coffeezilla put out videos in regards to this. Legal Mindset is talking about the settlement, why Ben could still be in trouble about it, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we're going to do is we'll start with Andrew's video about it, see what Andrew has to say, and then we will watch Coffeezilla's video, because Coffee is probably going to go in a different direction in regards to this settlement, considering Coffee had a different type of investigation. So we'll start with Andrew and get some of the details in regards to the settlement.
The Bricks and Minifigs Lego scandal is over, sort of. We're going to break down the total Mansell victory today on the Legal Mindset, where we teach you to be your own judge.
In my opinion, settlement is a bribe to shut you up while they don't need to correct themselves. Well, here's the thing. Brian Mansell, from the very beginning, literally just said that he either wanted Bricks and Minifigs to pay him for the Lego sets that they were going to take on consignment, or to just give them back. The settlement with Brian Mansell, it's kind of what they were seeking, even with Reckless Ben. It's what they were seeking from the very beginning. Is they were seeking either to have the Lego sets returned or compensation for the Lego sets that have gone missing. That was the intention from the very beginning. So in the case of Brian Mansell, he's getting what he was seeking the entire time. Where it escalated, where it became a problem, is with that. And now that has become an entirely separate thing, just to keep that in mind.
Andrew Esquire, American attorney. And those that have been following this case, it's been absolutely fascinating, as it's brought in so many different areas of law: criminal, civil, trespass, intellectual property, consignment agreements. It's been something that's very fascinating from a legal sense. And for those that don't know or need a quick update, of course, this comes down to a collection that was owned by the Mansell family. You see Brian Mansell right there, and was brought up by Reckless Ben in his YouTube videos, which brought him into infamy and a little bit of trouble as he covered this case. But now we finally have a settlement between Bricks and Minifigs Corporate, BAM, and the Mansell family. This is something that has been a long time coming, and it was reached, and you can see this here on the official Bricks and Minifigs website, through voluntary mediation, which is something that I encouraged from the beginning of this, because a lot of this could have been handled outside the courts through mediation, arbitration, and finally they listen, finally they go through with it and come to an agreement which saves them time, saves them money, saves them public relations. So we're going to read the actual statement, because it's very important to break down the corporate BS and get into what is actually going on here.
Yeah, because like this is the crux of it, is if Bricks and Minifigs had gone this route to begin with, they never would have been in the news. They never would have been exposed for being the evil company that they are. Had they just done this in the first place, Ben would have never gotten involved, and Ben would have never exposed Ammon for being the liar who is basically utilizing a corrupt police force as his own personal hit squad, effectively speaking.
So let's jump right into it. So here we go. This is the joint statement issued August 19th, 2026 between BAM Franchising, Eamon and Matt McNeff, Baker Salem, Josh Johnson, Brandon Best, and the Mansell family. So one thing that you do immediately notice just jumping out of this statement is, where is Reckless Ben? Where is Ben Schneider? Is he in there? No, he's not. His friends don't appear to be in there.
Which that's to be expected. This is a settlement agreement for monetary reasons between the parties involved. And for what everything that Ben did with his investigation, Ben is not involved in the monetary aspect of this case. Ben has nothing to do with it. Ben exposed all of it, but he is not a part of this. He's not going to be either a payee or a recipient of any money. And so it makes perfect sense why he would not be involved in any way, shape, or form.
So one thing that really came up in my mind was that assignment that they did as part of their documentary going through that sort of saga. One of the things they did was take parts of his inventory and kind of parcel them off and divvy those out amongst Ben and his friends, and then go and try to pursue claims based on that, try to pursue civil claims on that. So by not seeing them in this, that means that number one, they weren't pivotal to this. So I assume that they both had lawyers looking at this, and for whatever reason, they felt like Ben was not a necessary element here. Now, maybe the Mansells were able to cancel those agreements with Ben and his friends. Maybe those were revocable. Maybe they were, just temporary. Who knows? But they weren't seen as necessary to this. Also, it does not settle, and we'll get back to this, any of the RICO claims or any of the potential criminal stuff that involves Ben. So all of that stuff still floating out there, still very possible. Yep. This just involves the Mansells and BAM corporate themselves. So here it says, there was a comprehensive and amicable resolution of a private civil dispute related to the Mansell family's Lego Star Wars collection. The collection was consigned to a former operator of a Bricks and Minifigs Salem, Kaiser, Oregon store. This settlement agreement is a compromise of disputed claims. It is not an admission of liability, wrongdoing, or unlawful conduct by BAM, the Mansells, or any other related party. And this is very, very important because they've got those ongoing claims. They've got those things that are still out there with Ben. So nobody wants to admit liability, culpability, or much less criminality. And now, and shout out to Barbecue Counselor, who's actually done some great coverage of this, there may even be counterclaims where the law Gormans are making counterclaims against BAM corporate. That doesn't solve any of that or admit any wrongdoing.
And by the way, if you're looking to get a dollar amount of what the settlement is, I wouldn't hold my breath because chances are Bricks and Minifigs probably won't disclose that. And I would hazard a guess that the Mansells are probably going to be placed under a gag order by the court not to talk about this whatsoever. Yeah, maybe an NDA, maybe a gag order, maybe one or the other. But yeah, do not expect that. Do not expect either party to be talking publicly about what was discussed, what the final dollar amount is. None of that's going to be made public.
The Mansells confirm that they have been compensated by BAM for the losses associated with their consignment arrangement, and thus are releasing all their legal claims against BAM, its leadership, Baker Salem, Josh Johnson, Brandon Best, or any current Minifigs franchisee. BAM, the McNeffs, Baker, Josh, Brandon, likewise will dismiss their lawsuit against the Mansells. So a couple things you don't see here. You don't see the exact amount, and I don't think it's $200,000. I would imagine it's going to be something less than that because that was the optimistic, that was the big, shiny, flashy number for YouTube. But that number they ultimately settled on, probably less than $200K, but probably not something paltry.
Probably
so
100.
It might be something like $100K or $80K, $90K, who knows? But there's a settlement amount. It's probably not the full $200K. Through an exchange of records and information, or
I'd say like I wouldn't say 1 to 250. I'd say it's between 1 to 150. Okay, you mistyped. Okay, fair. Yeah, 1 to 150. That's a fair estimation.
The legal and mediation process, the parties developed a more complete understanding of what occurred. That's very good. The underlying dispute arose from a consignment contract between the Mansell family and the Oregon store. BAM, Baker Salem, Josh, and Brandon were not parties to it. The Mansell's loss arose in part from the sale, accounting, storage, and disposition of the inventory by the former operator of the store. So these parties are kind of pushing it off. They're kind of pushing all that liability and culpability off.
Okay, I'm not sure I like that. The Mansell's loss arose in part from the sale, accounting, storage, disposition of inventory by the former operator of the store. So this is them. This is Brooks and Minifigs, and by agreement, Mansell saying that basically this was all Crystal's fault. Crystal and her husband's fault. They're again basically throwing their. It kind of feels like they're throwing the previous franchisee owner under the bus and saying like, oh, you guys fucked up and now we're having to take the hit for it. And Brooks and Minifigs, Josh and Brandon are not taking any accountability for the fuck up that happened afterwards. Because you guys remember, we saw the video footage where Crystal, when Brandon comes in to take over the store, Crystal tells Brandon, listen, we need to figure this out because, I owe it, we have to, there's accountability so Brian can get his money for any of these, for any of these sets that have been sold. And I think it was Matt that was on the phone at the time with Brandon, was saying like, that's not your responsibility anymore. That's the business. And so this feels like they're throwing Crystal under the bus big time. I'm not thrilled about that. Even though Brian Mansell is getting compensation for it in some way, I hope Crystal keeps pushing forward with her case because, again, it sounds like they basically are putting it all on her head and they're accepting zero responsibility in any of this whatsoever.
And saying, hey, it wasn't us. Now, that doesn't mean it ultimately wasn't, right? Having a settlement agreement, these two can say, hey, neither one of us are blaming each other, but that doesn't mean that BAM isn't at fault. That doesn't mean that BAM might not have had a hand in this. All that means is as part of this settlement, they're not blaming each other.
Yeah.
As part of the settlement, Mansell has assigned to BAM his claims under the original consignment contract. So that's the part that's very fascinating to me. So that assignment, which we saw him doing to Ben, somehow that's now revoked, or whatever they had going on with Ben and his friends. The Mansells have somehow revoked that, drawn that back, canceled that, and now they've actually assigned that to BAM. Because of course, if you're BAM, you're a corporation, you want to make sure that you're actually able to get the thing you're bartering for. BAM may elect to pursue these claims against those responsible. So they're still holding out that if they figure out who did what, or if there are other parties that are to blame here, they still hold out the right to go after them. So BAM could actually end up suing other people in the future. It's possible. The Mansells have agreed to provide relevant records in support of the claims, and the parties believe this places responsibility for remedying any fault with the appropriate parties. This is another thing too. So now the Mansells, they went from being in the camp of Ben and cooperating with Ben to saying, no, we are now going to cooperate with BAM. So now the Mansells are obligated, at least in terms of records and general cooperation, to cooperate with BAM. They've shifted sides here. And that's very big. If you think about the overall PR of this case, you think about the overall coverage, the original family that's harmed now has kind of shifted their camp to sitting with BAM. Now they got a payout for that, but that's where they're at right now. BAM recognizes that the Mansell family experienced a genuine loss, prolonged uncertainty, and considerable frustration after the original contract was not properly administered by the former operator of the store. And during the transition...
Yeah, see, again, was not properly administered by the former operator of the store. Again, they're throwing everything on Crystal. They are absolutely throwing all responsibility on Crystal and saying, well, we're such good people. Like this former franchisee owner, she royally fucked up, but we're such good people that we're going to basically make Brian Mansell whole again, even though we're not really at fault, but because we're such wonderful people with kind hearts, we're going to take care of this. So, yeah, sounds like it's trying to buy time and change the story and go after Crystal. Yeah. I imagine before too long, we may hear about Bricks and Minifigs filing some kind of civil claim against Crystal in regards to this. I think that's coming soon.
The former operator to the replacement franchisee. BAM regrets that it did not quickly access information necessary to understand and resolve the matter. This is such an understatement. If they just taken the time to listen, if they stepped back, took a deep breath, and actually tried to solve the problem, we wouldn't have had this go on for so long. It wouldn't have become a public relations disaster. It wouldn't have become something that has multiple lawsuits spawned from this potential.
BAM brought the Mancells lightly with their own money and Andrew calls it victory. It's a little bit dicey because the Mancell family just wanted this to be over with. They wanted to basically get, they submitted the Legos for, for their father's care from the job, and they're just wanting to get the just compensation for their father's care. That's all they ever wanted in the first place. And Bricks and Minifigs, I think, took advantage of the fact that Brian Mancell is just a guy who's trying to look after his elderly father who has medical conditions. And I do think that Bricks and Minifigs probably used that against him to, especially in this mediation, to get him to fold and get him to, take part in this arbitration and come to a settlement.
Criminal stuff, all this stuff that really didn't need to come if they just took that time to listen earlier. And it's good to hear BAM admitting that fault here. It also issued an unqualified apology to the Mancell family for the losses and pain suffered from the events surrounding the dispute. The parties recognize that many Bricks and Minifigs franchisees and employees had no involvement surrounding this dispute and hope that this resolution brings closure to everyone involved and all may resume their normal business activities and personal lives. So there you have it. That is the corporate statement. Now, I want to focus on one last thing, and this was in a separate comment we got from Eamon McNeff, and he stated, whatever disagreements existed during this process, the Mancells experienced a genuine loss and great deal of uncertainty and frustration. That is key here, that he's coming out and saying whatever happened in this situation, these people had a genuine loss, a genuine frustration, their concerns were valid. And I think that goes really far to moving their PR in the right direction and getting back to business as usual.
I don't. Because people, here's the thing that I think from a PR perspective, Andrew's not considering, he may or may not be considering this. From a PR perspective, this is doing nothing for Bricks and Minifigs. Because, I hate to say this, we are at the stage with this case that the Mancell family being made whole by Bricks and Minifigs, by being made whole by Bricks and Minifigs is a distant issue that most people realistically don't care about anymore. The average person that has been following this case, either by traditional media, by social media, by the YouTube videos, by Reckless Ben's own videos, the Mancell family being, getting a settlement with Bricks and Minifigs, nobody cares. Because what we've seen outside of what happened with Brian Mancell through Ben's investigation and subsequent investigations by other YouTubers, by the way, is Bricks and Minifigs, particularly the corporate individuals, have proven themselves to be corrupt, crooked liars that will happily use police departments as their own personal thugs to go after people that call them out on their bullshit. That, from a PR perspective, is all that anyone cares about right now. So the PR of, we're doing right by the Mancells, it's too fucking late. Nobody cares. The average person that has been following this case in any way does not care that the Mancells are being made whole. That was an expectation, is that they would work things out and they would pay the Mancell family back. That was a literal expectation from the very beginning. Now all of the focus is on the corporate corruption and the police corruption. That is 100% the focus. That is where all of the PR is focused on now.
Because, of course, that's what Bricks and Minifigs wants to do, and they want to get back to just selling bricks and minifigs. Now, there's some loose ends. Let's talk about that. The mediation in no way includes any settlement of the lawsuit between BAM and Reckless Ben, any of the criminal stuff that's involving Reckless Ben. It doesn't solve any of that at all whatsoever. This is just with the Mancells. Also, and then once again, shout out to Barbecue Counselor on this one for mentioning this, there may be some more counterclaims that are brought by the Law Gormans against BAM. Doesn't solve any of that, right? So anything that's linked.
By the way, the Law Gormans, that's Crystal and her husband, the former franchisee owners that were basically railroaded out of their franchise.
Lingering out there, which we will definitely get to in future videos as we get updates with the court, as we get confirmation of court filings. We know things are real and filed with the court. As those things come in, we'll get you updates on that, but none of that is settled. But it does change the calculus for public relations and settlement. And that brings me to my judgment here. In judgment, this does settle the key issue that Reckless Ben started everything for. This was all.
Yes, it does. I agree. The problem is the key issue that Reckless Ben started this and fought over from the very beginning has been overshadowed by all the rest of it. That is the keynote of distinction there. If Bricks and Minifigs had not done what they did in regards to the various law enforcement agencies going after Ben, showcasing the level of corruption existing within the police departments and Bricks and Minifigs itself, then this would be fine. But now that corruption, that corporate and police corruption, has completely overshadowed literally everything in regarding this case.
About the 200K Legos, and now that's solved. So the damage, the harm, stealing Legos from old people, all that stuff, that's all gone. So that big monkey is handled, right? That gorilla is back in the cage, right? We've handled that situation, but we have not handled all the litigation coming from this. And BAM may still feel like they want to pursue these claims against Ben, or they want some damages from Ben. But I think it does ultimately encourage resolution of those other claims. Look.
No, I don't think it should. The encourages resolution of the civil case for both sides to move on and allow BAM to return to business while Ben can create videos on other topics. No. He needs to take this all the way. Again, this is I said this when we reviewed the other videos. Because BAM went the route it did, because they basically showcased how corrupt they are, because they basically showcased the level of corruption with multiple police departments that they are basically using as thugs to basically facilitate their own will, Ben needs to take this all the way and drop the fucking hammer on them. Because again, this is what I talk about. If he just lets this go and basically does like a nice, quiet little resolution, what do you think's going to happen with both Bricks and Minifigs, American Fork PD, and Provo PD? They're going to go back. The return to business is exactly the fucking problem. Returning to business as usual is a business of corruption, both from Bricks and Minifigs and from both police departments. That's why it needs to go all the way, and the fucking hammer of God needs to drop down on all three of them. They've been exposed. You cannot try and sweep this under the rug. You need to they actually need to be held accountable, or they will continue to do this again and again and again. And what's worse is by relinquishing this from a legal perspective, depending on how this gets settled, you may inadvertently establish a legal precedent for this business and these police departments to have behaved in the way they did, and it is now considered permissible. So no, there should be no resolution other than a judgment, and it needs to be taken all the fucking way. It does, because otherwise it's encouraging corrupted criminal behavior.
Ultimately encourage resolution of those other claims. Look, if you look at them and you say, hey, they went through mediation, they were willing to be reasonable, they were willing to apologize, they were willing to admit fault. Why can't they do that with Ben? Why can't they come to an agreement there and settle this, handle this, close this off, let Ben go off to covering other topics he wants to cover? Because it seems like he's got a lot of other interesting topics that he wants to go off and cover as a YouTuber, and that'll give him freedom to go about his life and to kind of move on. Why not go do that, move on, get the public relations settled, and handle all of this? I still think settlement, I still think a peaceful resolution is better than going through litigation, lawsuits, criminality.
I don't. With what they did, I think there has to be a non-peaceful legal resolution with criminality. I do. If Burks and Minifigs had gone this route in the very beginning, that would have been fine. But they decided to basically take the route of going full bore at Ben and exposing massive levels of corruption. I think that takes a peaceful resolution completely off the table, and now it's a zero-sum game. We are at the point where it kind of has to be all or nothing, because otherwise they're just gonna say, cool, we got away with it. We can keep doing this, and they will keep doing it.
But I want to know what all of you guys think about this in the comments below. What do you think about the settlement with the Mancells? Is it enough to bring this to close? Let me know in the comments below, and I will catch you on the next one.
Okay, so yeah, that was Andrew's take on it, which honestly, like, I'm not gonna like be mean at Andrew on this or anything. He was looking at it from the perspective of a lawyer. He was looking at it from the perspective of a lawyer who basically wants to, come to a quick and peaceful resolution to basically get the case taken care of. He's a lawyer. That's what he does. And more in particular, he is primarily a civil attorney. So he's playing the case of a natural observer. I don't do that shit. That's not me. I'm looking at this from the perspective of I see someone doing criminal activity. I see someone fucking people over for profit. I see someone using a police force for their own personal game, and the police force basically going, yeah, we're all in on the corruption too. I want justice. That's my perspective on it. Now, let's see what Coffee has to say about this, because Coffee also put out a video on this. So let's see what he has to say.
I can finally talk about it. My behind-the-scenes work with the Mancell family, Bricks and Minifigs, the settlement that finally happened. Although the story is not over, I'm going to give you the behind-the-scenes look to show you how self-inflicted this wound for Bricks and Minifigs really was. It's unbelievable. As bad as you think it is, it's so much worse. I literally, behind the scenes, nobody knew until now, was secretly trying to talk myself out of an 8 million viewed video, guys, that I did 2 months ago. The saga is still going on. Thousands of YouTubers are paying their rent every month with the Lego drama checks, and we tried to stop it early on. I mean, we tried to put an end to this thing. It was obvious what the solution always was, and I want to show you some of the behind the scenes work. It wasn't just me, by the way, and ultimately I wasn't successful, okay? Obviously lawyers had to get involved. It got super expensive. Months went on where the obvious thing didn't happen. But my point is, this got so dragged out. This is a story that should have lasted exactly 6 seconds, that seemingly has been going on for months now and will probably take, over a year longer. I mean, we have still litigation ongoing. So I want to break all of that down for you today. I've been holding on to this, knowing that eventually I really want to talk about it. I didn't sooner because I didn't want to torch the chance of any deal. Obviously, we now saw one come to light, and so that's why I feel comfortable talking about it now. And I'm only going to show just a few of the messages to prove the point, which is that everyone knew the solution literally months ago, and rather than doing that, the hard way has been chosen every step of the way. Like
well, the simple solution was back when Ben first got involved. Hell, before Ben even got involved. Before Ben was even involved in the case, Brian Mansell went to Bricks and Minifigs, went to Brandon Best and said, listen, I just either pay me the money for the Legos that you guys have or give me the Legos back. Just give them the fuck back. Like, the simple solution was always there from the very beginning, but Bricks and Minifigs, from the very beginning, decided to go, nah, I don't think I will.
Worst possible decision has been chosen repeatedly to the point you start to wonder if this is some sadistic need to be dunked on by the internet. We have to learn from what might be one of the greatest
Okay. I think what it was is like the sadistic need to be dunked on the internet. Now, I think part of this is this is going to sound screwy, but I think Ammon and Matt did not want to appear weak to their own employees or maybe even to their social circles that may be familiar with what's going on. That is my feeling, is they didn't want to be viewed as quote unquote caving, and so they in turn ended up bullying Brian Mansell to basically prove that they are bigger and tougher than the little guy. And yeah, it's like you guys have been saying, I think it was just sheer fucking hubris of wanting to appear big, strong, and in control.
Corporate fiascos of all time. Otherwise, what was it really worth, guys? I mean, yes, finally, the Mansells are being paid, and I am happy about that. Here's the official story. The Mansells confirmed they've been compensated by BAM for the losses associated with their consignment arrangement. We don't get an exact dollar figure, but it's probably somewhere in the realm of what would make the Mansell family feel good. But bear in mind, this is all under the context of they were also sort of being sued in a RICO lawsuit during that time. So it does feel a bit under duress. Again,
yeah.
I want to discuss this in more detail, but before I do, I want to take you back to when all of this started.
And by the way, the fact that Bricks and Minifigs and their attorneys are bringing a RICO case against Crystal, the former franchisee owner, Brian, and Ben, the fact that they went the route of bringing a RICO case, which, by the way, is used for racketeering, is another reason why you can't let them go. That's another reason why you have to basically go, you have to take them for everything, and you have to take this to the end. Because, again, if you let it go, then that means that Bricks and Minifigs, Ammon and Matt, will have learned, oh, if we want to bully someone, we can bring up a bullshit RICO case against them to scare them. And they need to learn, no, you can't. That when you do something like that, you will suffer consequences. That's a big factor of why I've said Ben and Crystal and everyone else involved needs to take it all the way and try and basically ruin him. They need to get that in front of a judge. They need to get a verdict in their favor, and they need to take Bricks and Minifigs down.
For me personally, now this is an email exchange with Reckless Ben, who of course is the guy who started the whole saga and, basically caused the Mansells to get kind of compensated in the first place because he's the one who applied the pressure to Bricks and Minifigs. He contacted me on May 26th, 2026 to just kind of, pitch the idea of me covering this story. Immediately, I kind of looked into it and I decided not to do it. I did not want to get involved early on. It's not that it wasn't important. It's just that I felt like all I would really be doing is rehashing what other people said, and I just wasn't interested in that type of thing. I said, I'm not sure how much I could add to what's already been said, and given that you and the wider community seem to be handling it well, I'm inclined to watch it from the sidelines. That's May 26th. So honestly, I wasn't even going to get involved in the first place. You would have never heard the word Coffeezilla Lego scandal had it not been for what happened the very next day. So on May 27th, 2026, this gets filed. A massive lawsuit against Reckless Ben that in total was like over $1 million. Bricks and Minifigs puts the gloves on and decides rather than, you know, just pay people back, they're going to fully go to war with the YouTuber who started it all. And by the way, they're still going to war with him. They still are trying to bankrupt him, in my view. And they're still trying to destroy him for what he did to their brand. They feel like he wronged them and whatever. And that's why I say, despite the Mancells now being, you know, paid back for this whole thing, it actually doesn't fully end the saga because we still have Bricks and Minifigs trying to basically destroy Reckless Ben's life. And it's in that same lawsuit, by the way, with Ben, that we also have Brian Mancell personally being listed as one of the defendants. So he himself was being sued in this giant lawsuit as well, which just struck me as so deeply wrong. And so I, against, you just saw, I, said, I'm not going to get involved with this. I, against, my initial thought, said, okay, May 28th, this is the next day. I've seen a bit more of this play out, and I'm starting to have some stronger feelings about this, particularly given the legal threats against yourself and others, what's a good number to reach out, etc. So this is when I first get involved. So what I'm telling you is I was never going to investigate this.
Isn't this the funny part? Because I don't have much of a doubt that Coffee's investigation influenced this final outcome. When Coffee put out his video about Bricks and Minifigs, that only galvanized people that were already on board with Ben about how corrupt Bricks and Minifigs is. That only galvanized them even further to go, holy shit, look at the lies these people are telling. And Coffee absolutely dumpstered on Bricks and Minifigs and caught them in so many fucking lies. And I have little doubt that his investigation was significantly influential in these negotiations that the lawyers did in regards to Brian Mancell. If they had not filed that lawsuit against Brian Mancell and Reckless Ben, Coffee would have never been involved, and he would have never done that investigation, and he would have never uncovered all of the data that he did and then displayed it for all the internet to see. Think about that. Because of Bricks and Minifigs' own sheer fucking hubris, they got the internet's greatest detective on their case. Kismet. Sheer fucking kismet.
I had other stuff going on, other investigations happening, and I see this extreme overreaction from Bricks and Minifigs corporate to basically try to destroy the life of a YouTuber who frankly brought an injustice to light. Now, I start investigating, and it's at this point that I begin to speak to everyone. At first, it's just to do the investigation part, but while I get access to everyone, I start realizing, man, I kind of hope I can broker a deal here. Like, it seems obvious, like so obvious to everyone involved that the Mancells need to be paid. And he shouldn't have ever been part of this ridiculous $1 million plus lawsuit that would definitely inflict more pain on him. And he's the victim in this. Why is this happening? So it was obvious to me he was going to have to be made right. And also, like, he'd have to be dropped from the lawsuit. So I start to engage in what is basically like a non-lawyer, hey, let me just kind of back channel, hopefully a resolution. It was pretty obvious to me, lawyers are just going to complicate this. It's a very simple answer. You just have to pay this guy and walk away. And then honestly, what is the story after that? Like, guy gets paid what he was owed. Like, initially he was wrong, but then the corporate makes it right. Like, it seems like although they wouldn't have made it right in time, this is late May, early June. I mean, the story had kind of gotten some traction, but not nearly as big as it was gonna go. it was just starting to go national, and I'm like, just like pay the guy, drop him from this ridiculous lawsuit, and you're done.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't even make financial sense at this point, because even at the biggest headline number, we're only talking about $200,000 in Legos, and that's even what the Gormans originally said. It was actually worth less than that. So it's not that much money compared to the millions of dollars of damages that are happening to the Bricks and Minifigs brand. This is a multi-million-dollar corporation. They're torching their goodwill.
Which, by the way, if you remember, Nick sort of did like an back of the envelope calculation of Bricks and Minifigs' like numbers as a corporation. On paper, it's showing them like the multi-million-dollar corporation is only on paper. Realistically speaking, Bricks and Minifigs probably has a far lesser financial value than the multi-millions that they claim to, because I think the multi-million company is factoring in the multitudes of franchisees that Bricks and Minifigs has around the country. However, here's the thing. Bricks and Minifigs is basically just licensing out their name to all of these franchisees. The franchisees own the individual stores. They're the ones that build the stores. They're the ones that equip the stores. They're the ones that basically take care of all of the finances for the stores. Bricks and Minifigs is just licensing their name for the franchisees to display, saying we are an officially licensed Bricks and Minifigs store, and Bricks and Minifigs only takes roughly like, I think it's estimated, I think that they only take like 5% from each Bricks and Minifigs store. Well, there's no way you're getting multi-millions from only getting 5% from each Bricks and Minifigs stores. Even if you have a couple of like quote unquote flagship stores that Bricks and Minifigs in and of itself owns proper versus being franchised out, there's still no way that Bricks and Minifigs is a multi-million-dollar, multi-millions corporation with what their intake is from each store. How many stores are? Off the top of my head, I want to say it was 300 stores. I could be mistaken about that. Nick did the calculations on like an unsub on the unsub episode when Reckless Ben was there. He did a real quick back to the envelope calculation. And yeah, it was like they're like yearly, they were like, I think they were taking in like maybe $100,000, maybe $120,000. Not a lot. They were not like Bricks and Minifigs realistically probably was not taking in a great deal of money from all of their franchisees every single year. So that multi-million-dollar corporation, that's on paper. I don't think it's in reality.
With the public. And I'm just pointing out the obvious, like, this doesn't make sense at all. I'm a third party. I'm unsolicited advice here, guys, but you should probably stop the nonsense. And so, I tell them, and this is just my own text, okay? I say, I'm trying to back channel a solution that I think is probably inevitable anyways. Brian has to be made whole and dropped from the suit. The sooner that happens, the better. Call when you can. This happens on June 4th, okay? This is almost a week before my video. I'm trying to prevent...
Don't they own the locations and rent it out to the franchise? No. No, they do not. The franchisees are the ones that rent out each location or they build it out. They are responsible for all bills. They are responsible for all employee paychecks. They are responsible for literally everything about the business. The only thing Bricks and Minifigs does is they license the company name. It's, to basically put a fine point on it, it's the same thing that Trump does. You know how Trump will license out his name to buildings and stuff like that? That's basically what Bricks and Minifigs does, is they license out their name in exchange so they can basically put a well-known brand, Bricks and Minifigs, as like the store is a Bricks and Minifigs store, and in exchange, the franchisees will give Bricks and Minifigs like a 5% cut.
All this from happening, or at least substantially make the story less interesting. I'm like, let's just get this guy paid and move on with our lives, right? By the way, the text under that is, I know it feels impossible, but consider dropping the lawsuits against everyone in this story. Yes, including Ben. I don't think this escalation ladder of lawsuits of $1.3 million over what amounts to about $100,000 in actual missing Legos makes sense, is going to resolve this, or helps your brand. Okay. So I'm really giving, honestly, some what now in hindsight looks like incredible advice.
And ironically enough, if they hadn't done what they did to Ben, Ben wouldn't have sued them either. That's the crazy part. Ben would not have sued Bricks and Minifigs. I mean, he did that small claims thing, but that was just as as part of the investigation. If they had just like not done anything, and if they just dropped stuff, Ben would have just been like, okay, job over. I'll move on to the next thing. Because it's now gone into federal court, Ben kind of has to see this through. He's got him and Crystal. They have to see this through 100%. And so Brooks and Mayfigs literally just brought all of this upon themselves because they refused to drop the suit in the beginning.
Be honest, which is just like, hey, this is all going to snowball. This is a disaster. Just drop it. Be done. This is an easy solution here, which, by the way, half of which we've already seen come true. Literally, we saw it just now, August 19th. They dragged it out in the media for 2 months, letting their brand be tarnished, by their own actions, frankly, because they knew early on that they could have gotten this done earlier. And basically, by the way, just...
Oh, hang on, just quickly rewatch the unsub episode. Nick's napkin math is $9 million a year versus the $400 million that they based that's on paper. Yeah, okay, so yeah, that's I could not remember the figures to save my life, but yes, there it is. Yeah, so Bricks Minifigs claims to be a $400 million company when in reality they're only taking in roughly I was way off when I said 100,000. I don't know where the fuck I came up with that number. I was completely incorrect about that. Yeah, it's so they're Bricks Minifigs is taking in roughly $9 million a year on their 5% from licensing fees versus the $400 million that they brag about. And I don't think it's not necessarily that they're lying about it, quote unquote. I think granted, it's not so clear cut. I do think there's some like sleight of hand happening here. That $400 million is probably on paper in terms of the number of stores that they're licensed. So what they're saying, so basically the way that they're doing it like on paper as like the paper value of, excuse me, the paper value of Bricks Minifigs as a corporation is they're basically taking the value of all the stores that they have licensing agreements with. They are taking all those values, taking a cumulative and applying that to Bricks and Minifigs as their corporate value. When it's not, it's like a paper value that doesn't actually have any actual bearing in reality. But because they have these stores licensed, they're saying, oh, well, because these stores are licensed under our banner, we're going to basically utilize them as a means of saying how valuable our company is, which would allow them to basically facilitate loans, or it could facilitate any other business dealings where being a $400 million company is far more valuable to them in negotiations as opposed to being a realistic $9 million company. That's why you see, oh, it's $400 million when they only make $9.
So, a lot of the breakdown ended up being that they disagreed on dropping the RICO lawsuit. Like, would they drop the RICO lawsuit before mediation, after mediation? There was a big disagreement about that. And that's kind of where my part fell apart, and I washed my hand of it, and I said, I can't help you guys. Basically, there was no bridging that gap because one party is saying, like, you have to drop the RICO lawsuit before we can settle these missing Legos, and the other side's like, well, come to the table and we'll talk. It's like, okay. Ultimately, there was just too big of a lack of trust, and the lawyers continued to get more and more involved, and ultimately, got it done after months of work, and I'm sure they all took their piece. That's kind of what's sad about this whole thing is, like, I think the real winners here are sadly the lawyers. The biggest losers are Bricks and Minifigs out of all of this, because they have stretched what should have been basically a $100,000 to $200,000 problem into a multi-million-dollar loss for themselves. And I know they probably think to themselves, like, in their head, the big villain is Ben, and that's why they refuse to drop the lawsuit against them. Ironically, it's their wanting to punish Ben that I think is preventing them from realizing that they are just hurting their own store franchisees. At this point, they're the reason this is all still in the media. And I think if they could see that and look past their sort of hatred of Ben, trying to destroy Ben, it would help them a lot. And I say that as someone, by the way, who doesn't want to see Bricks and Minifigs and all their franchisees fail. Like, I feel bad for a lot of.
I kind of agree with Coffee on this one. As a corporation, I'm not like cheering for Bricks and Minifigs to fail as a corporation. Who I'm cheering to fail is Ammon and Matt. Ammon and Matt need to fail miserably. Ammon and Matt basically need to be removed from the company. They need to be taken down legally. That I'm all for. Because I'm not going to ascribe the criminality of Ammon and Matt to the entire corporation. I'm sure there are plenty of people with it that are working within the corporation itself, not to mention all of the other franchisees that are not a party to this criminality. They're just trying to run a store selling Lego products. Ammon and Matt, they need to be taken down. They need to be removed from the business, and they need prison time. They need to actually spend some time in jail, particularly because they have lied to the police. They committed criminal offenses multiple times, and they need to spend time in prison. Anything less, in my opinion, is unacceptable.
The people who have been affected by this. I'm also not a person who blamed them for all of the problems, right? If you see my original video, there were a lot of people who actually shared some of the blame in how all of this got lost, right? Like you had the Gormans that had some accounting issues. You had some missing Legos at the store. You had some side deal stuff. So you had a lot of different elements that made up these missing Legos. I not only fully acknowledge that, we are the ones who brought that to light. And yet, I'm telling you, as someone who's seen it from behind the scenes, the reason this story has had legs for so long is all of these escalations and unwillingness to drop all of this legal stuff. The irony, of course, is that they think Ben is the monster who's destroying their company, when in actuality, I think if you look at the facts of the case, it's them. It's their decisions that have caused people like myself and the entire world to get interested in this story. So while I think it's fair for them to criticize some of Ben's methods, and I think that some of them were a little bit extreme, at the end of the day, the larger picture is that he got somebody who was wronged, paid back money.
Wait, as Reckless Ben said, episode 4 is about all the other Bricks and Minifigs stores that have been screwed by corporate. Is that what this part 4 is going to be? That's going to be very interesting. I'm going to be very interested to hear that story because I don't have fault with the other Bricks and Minifigs stores. I don't. I think that many of them could possibly be victim because if you remember, Crystal in the Salem Kaiser store, she was a victim of Bricks and Minifigs. They basically came in and exercised a bullshit clause in the contract, fraudulently exercising it, and kicked her out of her own store. They basically ripped the store away from her under the auspice of a lie, which was they claimed that because she had like a quote-unquote criminal history, they were going to exercise a clause within the franchise contract and remove the store from her. When in reality, the criminality on Kristen's behalf was like she had been busted for like shoplifting when she was 19, which was something like 20 years prior. And she was actually upfront with Bricks and Minifigs about that when she was looking to become a franchisee. She actually was upfront about it with the corporation, and the corporation was like, yeah, no, that's fine. That's no problem. Now, wherein the lie comes to play is I can't remember if this was the corporation that said this or not, or if this was just like rumor on the internet, that there was like supposedly like Crystal and her husband were using the Bricks and Minifigs store as like a front to pay for their like heroin addiction or some bullshit like that. Like, and that they were lying, saying that there were like birds flying around there and shitting all over the store. Like they were just out and out lying about what happened with Crystal. And therein was the problem, where they basically they completely lied about Crystal. So you can only imagine what they've lied about or how they fucked over other franchisees.
Obvious to everyone that Bricks and Minifigs would not have made this settlement without Ben being involved. So you can't, on the one hand, excuse Brian Mansell from this lawsuit, pay him money, literally apologize, saying, quote, Bam has issued an unqualified apology to the Mansell family for the losses and pain suffered, and yet keep up the lawsuit against the guy who brought it to light in the first place. The lack of self-awareness, the lack of the ability to say, hey, unequivocally, we were wrong. We are not hedging with lawyers. We're not, we're not suing people. We are just fully apologizing and making things right. That was always the answer. It still is the answer, and they can still choose that path if they want to. But given our current history, I won't hold my breath. I expect a long, drawn-out legal campaign that makes no one but the lawyers rich. Anyways, that's basically it. Just wanted to talk about my personal experience behind the scenes, and I'm glad the Mansells finally got paid.
Yeah, this ain't over. Not by a long shot. Oh, I can't wait for Ben's Part 4 to come out, where we can see basically how this is playing out with other stores. I still want to see movement against American Fork and Provo PD. I still think there needs to be a federal investigation against both those police departments, because both those police departments had showcased themselves as being quite corrupt. We probably won't know, unfortunately, but a girl can dream.